Okay, there we go. There we are. So the battery is fully charged, but I did forget the charging cable because Simon Galton was talking to me. Simon! He's a good guy, but man, he's like an ideas guy, you know, always with the ideas. It's like, Simon, I have to get to class. I can't think about the idea right now. It's okay. So, welcome back. Welcome back. I want to advertise an elective course for everyone before we move on. I want to advertise software dev tools and practices. It's an elective that you can take in the 4th semester. It teaches you useful things like how to use Unix, Linux, how to use Git properly, and also how to make a portfolio, how to contribute to software projects, all useful stuff. So I recommend that course for an elective. Please. Please. Also, it has no exam, but don't take it because it has no exam. All right. So, here we are, back to server-side web programming. So the order of the day today is to go through some of the essential information that you'll need in order to work with PHP this semester. So last class, we ended things off with the PHP Hello World, which is, you know, as good as far as it goes. However, I kind of hand-waved a few things about how to get that actually working, so let's now take some time, drill down, actually learn how to get that working. So little small tiny piece of theory before we start. In real software production, there will be a difference between your production environment and your development environment, right? The development environment is the software system machine apparatus that you do your development work on. This is the work that you need to do before your software is ready for deployment. In the case of web applications, up to now we've done pretty much exclusively client-side stuff. Client-side stuff, it's easy to have a development environment because you can just double-click on the HTML file, it loads everything, and everything is fine, right? That can work locally. However, now that we are now talking about server-side development, we cannot write PHP scripts and drop them into the file system, double-click on them, and expect them to work. It doesn't work like that. You require the server software, the server's operating system. Come on. You require the server's operating system to parse the PHP, run the PHP interpreter session, and you're in a situation where you have to emulate the server if you don't have a server, right? This is the purpose of the XAMPP software. Another way of thinking about it, because we're doing server-side programming, the way that servers interact is through HTTP packets. Unless you have something that is sending HTTP packets, you're not going to be able to interact with it the way you think you are, right? You need to emulate the same process that the browser is using to communicate with the server. So there are a number of different ways of doing this. It depends largely on the particular language and development environment and server environment that you're working with. In this class, we are working with Apache servers and PHP. Thus, we will be using tools specific to that tool chain. Other tools work similarly, but this is the one that we're using for us. Pretty much everybody, well, okay, all right. I'm going to do a diagram. Time for a diagram. So, you may remember last time on class, I gave you this diagram where we have the client, we have the server, we have the loose connection of servers, routers, and thingies called the internet. Packets come and go between it. But I introduced to you the concept of the socket layer. Right? Can anybody remind us what the socket layer is?
It's kind of like a mailbox in apartments. It has a bunch of ports that go to different places, and you send and receive through those.
Precisely so. It's similar to one of those mailbox boards that you see in apartment buildings or post offices in the country. When a software process, like a browser, creates a packet, it sends that packet to the socket layer. It places it at a particular address, which is called a port number. The internet infrastructure is looking for it there, sends it off to the internet. In theory, right? One of the things that we're going to do today is we are going to configure our browsers so that the port we're using is not the port associated with outgoing internet traffic. The port that we are going to use has a special name, and that special name is localhost. Right? So, when we launch the XAMPP software, it will tell us which port it's using to place its packets, or where it's listening for packets. We then have to redirect our browser to place HTTP packets at that address, so that the emulated server software knows where to look for them. Right? So, previously, we would have a web server operating on top of the server's hardware. It would be sending and receiving packets. But today we're doing something a little bit different. And this, by the way, is generally how your production environment is configured. But for your development environment, we will start a new software process. A new software process on our client machine, known as XAMPP. XAMPP is configured to listen to one of these ports for incoming packets, and it has an incoming port and an outgoing port, but it's not the same port that's sending network traffic to the internet. Does this make sense so far? So far, so good? Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, there we go. So, XAMPP is listening for packets occurring in its sort of inbox in the socket layer. When it finishes processing things, it places things in its own outbox within the socket layer, and the browser, because everything is bound to the name localhost, knows where to receive those packets back for the browser. So, a couple of important things about XAMPP, right? It is not communicating with the browser directly, as in, like, the server, the XAMPP server does not, for example, need to know what the process ID is for the browser. It doesn't need to be able to find that running program. The interface is the socket layer, right? Both programs are configured to listen for the same spots in the socket layer, right? Does that make sense? So, yeah, that's, any questions? Okay, so that's what XAMPP does. There we go. So, that's the link for the website, XAMPP. Very, very, very important note. The version of PHP which is running on CS Unix is, oh, I think it's PHP 7.9 or 8 or something like that. 7.2, oh yeah, sorry, 7.2, 7.2.24. So, this is not the most current version of PHP. CS Unix needs to be updated, but hasn't. So, it is very, very important that each of you download a version of XAMPP corresponding to the version of PHP that is on XAMPP. If you do not, a program which compiles for you on your computer when you're doing your assignment may not compile for me when I go to grade it. Right? Come on in. So, this is like, okay, sure, fine. It's also important for everyone to please test your assignments before you finalize their submission. All right? Unfortunately, the way that most students regard CS Unix is, oh, this is like my second submission I have to make, you know. Oh, I'll just take the files, throw them up, there you go. I've submitted, yay! Well, that's not actually the case. That's not true. It's also very, 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 very important that your program actually works, right? Your program must not only be on the server, your program must work on the server, right? It is not sufficient to simply take your files, put them on the server, and that's it. Like, I cannot tell you the number of times that I have had a student who has, like, taken their assignment as a zip file, put it up on the server, and said, I submitted it to the server. It's right there, can't you see it? Yes, but it doesn't work, right? The purpose of putting everybody through the agony of using CS Unix is that you are to get experience deploying web applications, right? This is why a non-trivial portion of your grade on an assignment is, does the CS Unix version work? If it doesn't, it's essentially in the same category of problem as you submitted to me a Java assignment that doesn't even compile, right? You get if not zero, pretty astonishingly close to a zero, right? The whole point of CS Unix is that you are deploying a web application, right? This means that you should be sending it to CS Unix first, before your Canvas submission, right? You should put it up on CS Unix before you make your Canvas submission, because you should be testing it on CS Unix. You should load your friggin' website. The number of assignments I get where it's obvious the person has not even loaded their website. You know, it's like, you're not acquiring the industry relevant skills that a college program is supposed to be giving you if you're not even checking to see if your program loads. So yeah, you have to check to see if your program loads. You have to, like, the ideal workflow, right? Work on your local development environment using XAMPP until you are satisfied with the solution. Upload it to CS Unix. Check on CS Unix that it works, and then submit on Canvas. And yes, I am aware that this means that, you have to do CS Unix like ahead of the deadline. I'm aware of that. Right? Yes, you have to, like, having your code properly tested is part of having deployed your code, right? So, does that make sense? There's, this is normally like not a huge issue, and like on the first assignment or maybe two, there's a certain degree of forgiveness for this. But towards the end of the course, there will be an assignment that requires you to connect to an SQL database on CS Unix, and that assignment, if you do not have, like, if you have not even tested your code to the extent that, like, if your assignment doesn't even connect to the database, it does nothing useful, and you get no grades, because, like, it's kind of like falling at the first hurdle. And, like, I don't care how pristine your code looks in your local development environment. Ultimately, what matters is, can you deploy it, right? Because if you can't deploy it, then there's no point, right? There's no point in a website that you wrote for yourself. The whole point is to put it on gosh darn internet. Make sense? Okay, alright. So the version of PHP is 7.2.24. You should get a version of XAMPP which matches this. I will show you how to do this now. If you go to XAMPP, apachefriends.org, and you have to go to download, is that at the top? Down. There we go. Select your operating system and click More Downloads. It will take you to sourceforge.net. You will find all of your XAMPP installations backdated. Sort by name, probably. The other way, thank you. 7.2.24. Right there. That's the version you want. You may think this is an artificial restriction, but having to work with a particular version, and even a backdated version of software, is actually a real-world thing that you will experience in industry. So, good to get the practice in. But that's the guy, 7.2.24. Download the thingy, install the thingy, and you're off to the races. Any questions?
The Portal version or the other version?
Sorry?
There are two versions there. Portal one on which one is the one that has the
The non-portable version is probably fine, but if it doesn't work, use the other one. Good. The whole point of XAMPP, the reason that it's called XAMPP, is that it is cross-platform. So it doesn't matter if you're using Windows, Linux, or Mac, this software works. That's why I recommend it over Wham. Wham, which is basically the same thing, but it's just for Windows. So, you know. Yeah. Good. Any questions? Yeah.
I installed XAMPP through my apps, and it's saying version 3.2.2 compiled 2015.
Yep.
See, that's.
I know.
Will that work for this course? Or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, what we're like, the thing about this course is the PHP we are working with is not, you know, we're not exactly at the cutting edge,
Yeah.
right? So this will be fine. Unfortunately, it's the best I have.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you are dissatisfied with the degree of up-to-dateness of the software used in this course, please feel free to fill out a student evaluation at the end of the course indicating your thoughts about that, so that perhaps my boss will see that and perhaps will give me development time to fix these problems. And by fix these problems, I mean fix them by taking a blowtorch to this course and replacing it with Node.js. So, oh man, it's like, it needs the blowtorch, you know? I yearn for the flamethrower, you know? So, so let's actually load. On the lab computers, XAMPP is available through Mohawk Apps. A couple of people have come to me this morning, or this afternoon, telling me that Mohawk Apps is kind of playing funny with their own laptops. So, on your own machine, since you have administrator privileges, I recommend installing your own version of XAMPP. But if you're on a lab computer, this is like the only way you can do it. So. I'm never gonna get dead. Got to fix these broken courses. So, I apologize for the skewness of this interface. Unfortunately, I can't make it any bigger. Hopefully all of you are looking at this as well. So this is the XAMPP control panel. Each one of these rows is a different type of server. In this course, we are primarily concerned with the first one. You may notice that it says Apache. That is our Apache web server. Toward the end of this course, we will introduce the MySQL database server as a local development environment for the databases that we do. But yeah, basically this one and that one. FileZilla is an FTP server, file transfer protocol. I don't know what the other two are. They probably do something cool. So if you start your Apache server, you will see it goes from yellow to green. You may get the Windows Defender firewall, blah, 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 blah. If you try to allow access, you will need an administrator password that you do not have, but if you click cancel, it'll work anyway. So just click cancel. So, one thing that's important to note about this course, this is the software development stream. The networking side has courses on Unix server administration. So when you see this admin button, just like to yourself, think there be dragons, right? There are programs at this very school that teach entire courses on that button. So don't feel bad that you're, you know, that you don't know what's going on there. I might dip into the initialization files once or twice just to kind of show you around, but generally there, you know, there's a great big not my job filter over that button. Okay? That and config. So I would like to point out, however, this, which does constitute part of your job, the port numbers which are being used by XAMPP. A little bit tiny. Normally, the one that we are concerned with, the ingestion port for XAMPP, is the second of these two numbers, 1080. Right? So the domain is localhost, the port is 1080. Let me show you how you get there. If you open a browser tab in your favorite browser, or whichever one the school happens to have, localhost, colon, 1080. In a URL, the colon is how you state what port to direct your packets to. There you go. Particularly if you're doing XAMPP on your own computer, you may get a port that is not 1080. Like on the lab computers, I'm pretty sure it's 1080 for most people most of the time. But I know like every time I've tried to do it on the Podium computers, that's how it is, but I don't want to make generalizations, you know? So, that works, but if you just type localhost, site can't be reached, right? You're not looking for it at the right port. So, you have to include the port number. Make sense? So far so good? Alright. So this is a splash page that XAMPP provides for you by default. Generally it doesn't say anything that's terribly interesting. So you can, you know, we can get rid of it and replace it with something a little more interesting. So, I would like to pull your attention to the Explorer button. If you click that, it will bring you to the XAMPP installation directory. The XAMPP installation directory contains lots of things you don't care about, but one thing that you very much do care about, and that is the htdocs folder. htdocs in XAMPP is the same thing as your public HTML directory on your CS Unix account is, right? The way that that gets structured, your public HTML directory, that structure is the same as htdocs here. In theory, you copy files between one and the other and everything is fine, despite the fact that, you know, this is Windows and does not have the Unix file permission system, but everything is handled with respect to that on the back end, so you don't really have to worry about it. htdocs. Dashboard, index. This is this page that we just looked at, or at least the HTML for it. So, very good. However, let's discuss a problem. Let's discuss a problem, a big fat problem with XAMPP and lab computers. This is not a problem if you're working on your own laptop, but this is a problem if you're working on the lab computers. So please pay attention. Pay very careful attention. the XAMPP folder is stored within the root directory of the hard drive. If I go to this PC, C drive, XAMPP. So what's the problem with this? Eh?
You can't go there on those stupid computers.
Oh, you can. That's actually the problem. Yes.
Everyone can access it.
Everyone can access it. So this is not a region of the operating system that is gated for a particular user. This is a region of the operating system that anyone who has valid login credentials can access. This is public space, right? You need to treat it as public space. So, if you are working on your assignment on the lab computer, you save your files, you're like, copy to my USB, I have my files. I log out of my computer, I go to my next class. It's boring, but I go to it anyways. Some ne'er-do-well, also taking the program, but thoroughly and terribly evil in affect, comes to your computer, logs into your computer and says, ooh, look at that, some assignment files in XAMPP. Now they're our assignment files in XAMPP. And guess what? You both get written up for plagiarism. That's how that works. Alright? Because one of the provisions in the plagiarism document, one of the things that you must do is adequately protect your work from theft. Right? This is also a very good reason not to leave your USB keys or drives lying around in the labs. Right? If you fail to adequately protect your work from being stolen, and it is stolen, basically I'm going to have one of these plagiarism cases where I have identical submissions, and one person is like, I have no idea how this happened, and I believe them, but it's still plagiarism, because it's down to the comments, right? So, XAMPP is public space. There is no way around this problem. The best thing you can do is delete your work when you're finished and empty the recycle bin. Because I don't know if the recycle bin is also globally stored. It probably is. Right? So don't go around checking computers' recycle bins for other people's assignments, please. Don't do that either. Have I made myself perfectly clear? Right? Is this public or private? What should you never leave there? Good. It's really kind of best to have your own laptop, you know? So, anyway. So I just deleted all of the stuff in there already. I'm going to make a folder. New folder. Normally I label these with like today's date, because I typically post these to the announcements feed after class. So 2025-0, oh, that's 4. There we go. So, wow, we're already over 1/4 of the way through September. So now, the way that you make a PHP script, you create a simple text file, but you have to give it the .php extension. I'm not fussy about what editor you use. Personally, in class, I use Notepad++, just because VS Code doesn't play nicely with Mohawk apps. I've been backstabbed by it too many times. I'm done with it. Done with VS Code. Although I perfectly understand that most people in the class will be using VS Code. VS Code has like 70% of the market share right now for this type of stuff. So it's, it's a good, it's decent. Yes?
When we're downloading it to our actual device, can we put it on like our local C drive? Is that okay for like our actual one?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the only problem is that presumably you're the only person who has login credentials to your own local
Yeah.
machine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Oh, and by the way, on the subject of plagiarism, I don't want to hear any of this nonsense. Oh, I let my friend borrow my computer, that's why our assignments are exactly the same. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. If your friend wants to use your computer, make them an account. You can do that. You don't have to share your files when you're sharing your computer. Thank you very much. So just, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I have zero tolerance for that particular excuse. All right, but this is the good class. So I'm not teaching any other classes, but I know this is the good class. So I know this is the good class because you all picked me. That's why. So open up your code editor of choice. For me, that's Notepad++, but you can do whatever you like. There we go. That's the shortcut. That's the shortcut. Create a new file and save that new file to your XAMPP folder. There we go. Call this file hello.php. We are now going to re-perform hello world. Question mark PHP. This is the opening PHP tag. Whoa. There we go. Echo. Hello, comma, world. HT docs. If you access localhost, you should now see this or something similar. This is your default Apache index page when the directory you have accessed does not itself have an index page. It's very handy. You can click. There's hello.php. Click to load. Load. There's our hello world. Very good. So far so good. How many people got that working? How many people are not quite there yet? Okay, we'll give you a moment. So, go here and replace replace that dashboard with /minus, which is the name of your folder. Now, click that. There you go. Well, show me your directory. So, go back to your browser. Where it says dashboard, replace that with the name of the folder.
Like, I have to leave this have a, like, recommend what to write.
How do you get the codes?
Like, what's the creation stuff?
Show me your browser. Dashboard.
Let's say,
Just gotta go in H. Alright. Good. So much for the hello world. Don't care about news. Go away. Thank you. Good. So, let's go back. Let me just see what we have. See if there's anything worth mentioning here. Oh, yes, this, okay. So, we're going to talk a little more theory now. Now that we've done some PHP, we'll do some theory, then we'll do some more PHP. So, web development. Let us discuss some essential definitions. What is a web application? Don't read it. An application on the web, very good. So, a web application is all of the client-side code and all of the server-side code taken in combination, right? So, a web application should be viewed as having two halves always. Sometimes the server isn't doing very much. That's fine. Sometimes the client side isn't doing very much. That's also fine. There's all kinds of different web applications, right? But a web application is composed of both. So, does anybody know what a stack is? Like a technology stack?
The technology you use to develop your web app.
Yes, the technologies which are used to develop your web application. So, there are lots of different stacks. You also have the ability to customize how your stack works. But, you know, generally, like, there are some that are thought to work better together than others. So, the stack that we are studying in this class will be the LAMP stack. LAMP stack stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP or Perl. We're doing PHP. Does anybody know any other popular stacks?
The MERN stack,
Do you know what MERN stands for?
Mongo, Express, React, and Node.
Mongo, Express, React, and Node. So that's a pretty good one, right? Node.js is like a thing everybody will have to learn eventually because it's like a market dominator at the moment.
Sorry.
Thank you. So, some people don't like Mongo though. They prefer a plain old regular relational database. So, if you replace the M in MERN with SQL, you get CERN, the CERN stack, right? You could also take M to mean MySQL. It's not really like a hard or fast thing, right? But there's one kind of funny one that I've heard is gaining popularity. Has anybody heard of the triple T stack?
Is it TypeScript? And I forget the other two.
It's TypeScript, TypeScript, and TypeScript, right? So basically TypeScript compiles to JavaScript, which means that you can write TypeScript which compiles to React or Node, right? So triple T, TypeScript all the way down. So, very good. So, you'll notice though that like most of what we're talking about here is back-end stuff. This is because the technologies composing the front end are more or less fixed. It doesn't matter how you serve web pages, they are going to be composed of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So, front-end stack and back-end stack have two corresponding job titles. You've probably heard of them, front-end developer and back-end developer, right? The objective of this program is to craft from each and every one of you a quote-unquote full stack developer. What do you suppose a full stack developer does?
Both.
Both, yes, everything. So basically the way that it works, the larger the company that you end up working for, the more clearly demarcated your duties will be. If you are the one web developer that has been hired by some company, say, Crazy Johnson's Spring Company, right? If you've been hired by Crazy Johnson's Spring Company, and they manufacture springs, but for some reason this internet thing seems to be a thing, so they decided they want to put some money into a website. And so they hire you as a co-op student to write a website for their spring company. If there's nobody working with you, you have to do everything, right? That's just, that's just how it works. So you need to be able to do front end and back end, but people tend to be like, people's abilities vary. One person might be absolute hot garbage at anything to do with databases, but really good at UI, right? UI kind of requires a bit of an aesthetic sense, right? Whereas databases is almost anti-aesthetic, right? It's so functional. So, different strokes for different folks. There's like you can be really, really, really good at one particular thing. But like generally, if you're trying to get into something from the ground level, you should know something of everything. And even like, take for example, your expert client-side JavaScript programmer, highly expert JavaScript programmer. This person is still going to know at least the rudiments of server programming, right? It's not like the domain of knowledge is like rigid, right? The domains of knowledge are a little bit porous. But yeah, does that make sense? Any questions about that? Good. Yep. So, a few notes on the software development process then. So, when embarking on a software project, if you're starting this project from scratch, you can save yourself a whole lot of headache by nailing a few things down before you start coding. So, let's say that, let's put ourselves in the position of the junior full stack developer who is developing the website for Crazy Johnson's Spring Company. Alright? The very, very, very first thing that you want to do is to establish what it is that your customer wants. Right? I know it sounds basic, but this is often overlooked. Right? Most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, the person you're writing a website for will be a non-technical person. Right? A normie. Whenever I use the term normie in class, I mean a non-technical person. Alright? That is my personal definition of normie. I married a normie. I like normies. Normies are fine. Most people are normies, right? It's fine. But still, I wouldn't want my wife to try to write a program, right? She's wonderful at raising the babies. But JavaScript, we both understand that's the household division of labor. I've got the JavaScript, anyway. So, normies, a problem that you find with normies is that they really have no conception about software at all. Software is completely mysterious to them. It's actually kind of amazing talking to normies how little they know about software. They have, in particular, no conception of what is a difficult thing to do and no conception of what is an easy thing to do. Thus, if the person that you're being paid by to develop a website, is this something I said?
He just wanted to see what we're up to.
Oh, okay. I have actually had people who come into my classroom to do that. It was kind of funny. It was like, I was like teaching a thing, and this guy pops in, and he's like, "Oh, so what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm teaching introductory programming for digital health. May I help you?" It's like, "Oh, well, I'm interested in what I might be able to take as an elective." And I said, "Well, this is actually a course for the bachelor's degree program that's not offered as an elective. So, yeah." He's like, "Well," and he got all snippy with me, and I was like, "Well, you're interrupting my class." But you get all sorts, right? So I was talking about normies, yes. When the person who's paying me money to do software is a normie, it presents a particular set of challenges. It is difficult to make a normie understand that a change can be weeks to months of work. Right? It is difficult to make them understand. Generally speaking, what they're asking you to do will be way more difficult than they think it is, rather than easier than they think it is, right? Because, of course, Murphy's Law. You guys know Murphy's Law? Right? What's Murphy's Law?
Can't happen anymore.
Yeah, if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. That's the one I heard. And then the First Amendment to Murphy's Law is if it can't go wrong, it can. So normies will ask you, like, a person who is a normie who asks you to add a feature to the website will generally have no concept of how much work that is, therefore will have no concept of how much you will need to be paid to do something like that. Basically, they'll expect a whole bunch of stuff for free, right? This is called scope creep. Scope creep. You must take every effort to guard against scope creep, right? Trust me, even people who are software people will introduce scope creep. Always get the scope of work down in writing. Down in writing. You must have a contract, have the work you are doing formally defined. You are paying me for this, and this is what you are paying me for. Right? Just by means of a personal anecdote on this front, some of you may know that I'm involved with the Video Game Development Club here on campus. I've got like a couple of game projects which are up on Steam, and so like at one point I was like approached by a person who connected me to someone else who was someone who used to have something to do with the Game Dev Club. There was this this like artist up in Northern Ontario, like way the hell up in Northern Ontario, like Thunder Bay or somewhere around there, who like did some kind of like mildly patriotic comic book for kids about, I don't know. I didn't really look into it that much. But he said he wanted like a game app, like a collectible card trading app. And I'm like, I was like, well, let me. At this was kind of a point before I was like full time here, so I was kind of like, well, if he's paying money for a thing I do, maybe that's a thing, right? So I was like, okay, well, what do you want, right? Like, tell me what you're looking for, because from my perspective, he kind of leads with the project doesn't have much money, which is always a great way to start, right? And I'm like, well, what I would be willing to do for you is I'd be willing to, like, for perhaps a nominal fee, put a week or two into creating a demo, some kind of proof of concept thing that you could put up on, like, one of the things, the GoFundMe or whatever it is, the crowdfunding platforms. And if you can get money for the development, then maybe I'd be willing to do the development for you. But I could grind you out like a quick little prototype maybe. And he like was under the impression I would do it for free.
You get paid in exposure.
Yeah, work for exposure, and I know that's like typical in like artist circles perhaps to work for exposure, but like not when I've got children to feed, So yeah, it was like also like I was like well, how much of an app do you want? Like for example, you say this is like a collectible card app. Do you want like multiplayer or anything like that? And it's like, well, obviously we want multiplayer. And I'm like, but you haven't factored in like server costs or like anything to do with what you want to do. You've basically come into this with the impression that software development is free, software upkeep is free, and all of the computers you'll ever need to do anything on are also free, and I'm free as well. So basically, it didn't work out. That's the end of my story. Is like it didn't work out. I eventually suggested that the guy that maybe you'd be able to get like a subsidized co-op student to do some of what he wanted, which which is a thing, that is you know, do you guys not know that? The government subsidizes your co-op positions?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they hire you. You're cheap labor. Like, I know you guys knew you were cheap.
50% or 100%?
I have no idea. But they're businesses, they'll take anything they can get, right? But yeah, so like, that was a thing that fell flat because during the requirements analysis, I was like, oh wait, this guy's bonkers. This guy just, reality and this person many years ago parted company, alright? So that's a good thing to know, right? It's good not to get involved with people who are 3 sheets to the wind, you know, 1 card short of a deck, a couple of bricks short of a load, not the sharpest crayon in the crayon box, right? It's a good thing to know if you're getting into bed with a crazy person before you do so, right? So that's one of the purposes of requirements gathering. Find out if the project is something you're likely to get paid for, right? Number 2, let's assume that this project passes the sniff test, right? Once you've gathered the requirements, one thing that normies also have no idea about, aside from like what their software should do, what the scope of the work should be. Another thing that normies really have no concept of whatsoever is like anything to do with any of the particular technologies that, your average normie is unlikely to have even heard of the term CSS, right? And if they know the word JavaScript, it's only from watching The Big Bang Theory, right? Like actually though, this is where normies learn about software, is from television shows that aren't even about software people. So, is that show still going on? No? Good. So, part of the reason in this program we offer you a broad set of tools is so that you can intelligently decide what project is good for which tools, right? You must use discernment. Some tools are better for some things than others, right? There are use cases where a relational database is exactly what you want. There are use cases where a non-SQL database would do better, right? It's not all a matter of taking a look, as much as I love the Stack Overflow developer survey, it's not simply a matter of looking at the developer survey, seeing what the most popular language is and picking that, right? All of your languages have pros and cons. It is your job, partially, to know what those pros and cons are and select them appropriately to the situation, right? This is called expertise. You're expected to have expertise, right? Good. So, there is a great deal to be said about software design that I do not have time to talk about here. I'm hoping that, you'll have picked up a certain amount of it from Java, that you'll continue to pick up some of it from .NET. There's isn't there a course that there's a course in second semester that's supposed to be kind of designy? I'm not sure. Systems analysis and design. It's even got design in the title. Did you guys learn anything from systems analysis and design? A little bit? Well, hopefully you learned something. So, once you have your design, you then proceed to development. Development starts in your local development environment. You develop it on your own computer before you try to push it to the cloud or deploy it to a server. Because This is your first round of debugging, right? So I actually kind of disagree with this layout, right? Implying that testing is a thing that you do after you're finished local development is bad and wrong, right? Really, you should be testing continuously. Every time you write, like my general rule that I tell students is, when you're developing software, literally every 3, maybe 4 lines of code, stop and test. Literally that frequently, right? When I develop software projects myself, for my own personal benefit, that is how frequently I test them, right? The earlier you test, the easier it is to test, right? So consider the problem of debugging from this perspective, right? Let's say you are testing a program that is 50 lines of code. 50-line program is not that long. Nevertheless, the bug is somewhere in 50 lines of code. Now, let's imagine that when you had written 25 of those lines of code, you stopped and you tested the first half before proceeding to write the second half. Having tested the first half, you would only have 25 lines of code for that bug to possibly live in, rather than 50. When you went on to the next 25 lines of code, you would only have, again, half of that program to look through to try to find the bug. For me, 3 to 4 lines of code is the correct number, because 3 to 4 lines of code will often express a complete thought, right? Like, I know that, this is programming and not like an English sentence, but like, to me, 3 to 4 lines of code expresses about as much as an English sentence would, right, in terms of like lexical content. You can express one chunk of thought, one operation you're trying to perform, right? It doesn't make sense to, like, if you're in the middle of a swap operation, it doesn't make sense to, like, test to make sure that the first of the 3 operations works, and the second and the third. There is such a thing as overdoing it, right? But the threshold is much closer to the individual line of code than most people think, right? So, given that, you should be testing every 3 or 4 lines of code. So what's the problem with having your code generated for you?
You get like hundreds of lines of code at once, and there's probably an error somewhere in there. You gotta go through all of it to find it.
Exactly. You generate for yourself hundreds of lines of code, right? And if you're paying for the model, maybe thousands of lines of code. The model lies, introduces errors and bugs, right? You know what the joke going around industry is right now? Okay, sure, we've laid off half of the developers, but we've also had to double the size of the testing department, right? So yeah, like, AI is not all that it's cracked up to be, and a lot of it is marketing hype, right? I saw some interesting statistics. Apparently, there was a recent article from MIT or somebody very highly placed that, like, of the AI projects that corporations have been taking on, 95% of them have resulted in failure. Like, the project has failed at this point, which is a pretty high failure rate. And that study from MIT has also noted that AI has not been transformational in the way that people imagined that it would be 2 years ago. Basically, business practices have not been substantially altered by the addition of AI, despite the fact that, it's been the overwhelming impetus behind like management and resource allocation to try to get it to be as good as possible, right? It hasn't failed for lack of trying, right? But yeah, so if I were to give you some financial advice, don't invest in any AI companies. Not that I'm giving financial advice. If you want financial advice, go talk to a banker, I guess. Yes. So testing, test. Testing should be deeply integrated into your development practice. Testing is not something you do after the fact. If you test as a part of your, as integrated into your development practice, guess what, folks? You don't have to do as much testing afterwards. Or, like, you do the same amount of testing, but you don't have to do as much debugging because you caught those bugs earlier, right? It's like, do you want to deal with a little itty bitty ladybug? Squash that thing? I know we're not supposed to squash ladybugs because of all the bugs. That's like the one that we supposedly have an affinity with because it's cute, right? If you look closely at a ladybug, it's not actually cute, but ladybugs are like the one bug, right? Now imagine, that little tiny ladybug, flitting about on 2 or 3 lines of your code. Now imagine, I don't know, what's a bug that everybody finds disgusting? Spiders? They're not technically insects.
Cockroaches?
Cockroaches? Sure. How about earwigs? You guys like earwigs? Yeah. Silverfish? Yeah. So just imagine that you had an earwig that was like the size of those 4 desks. And it was scuttling around on 500 or 600 lines of code, right? That's the difference we're talking about, right? You want to catch bugs when they're small, right? Actually, infectious disease might be another good analogy, but anyway. So, test. Test early, test often. He who does not test is lost. Or she who does not test is lost. So, after you are sufficiently satisfied with your local version, you deploy it. In our case, we are deploying to CS Unix. This is a small step. If you have configured your local development environment correctly, this is a small step. If you've configured it to be the same as your production environment. For example, what is the version of the XAMPP software that everyone is going to download? 7.2.24, very good, very good. Then, critically, you test it once deployed. Even if you don't think anything can go wrong, you make sure that nothing goes wrong. This is the most critical test because if it has been deployed, your customers can see it. The customer is the least forgiving of all possible people when it comes to software bugs. Alright? Make sense? All good? So nobody's going to get into any stupid contracts or work for exposure? Okay. Good. You may think that scope creep can't happen to you, but it can. It also happened to me when I was doing my PhD, and due to scope creep, and other factors as well, but scope creep was definitely non-zero. It actually took me a full decade to get my PhD. And that was because, in part, every time I had finished the software up to a particular point, my supervisor, who, was nice enough, but, was very busy and didn't have a huge amount of time for my project, it's like, oh, well, what if we just did this much more? It's like, there's another 4 months of my life gone. And that happens to people. people like you and me. People like me, that happened to me. Just, like, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no, guys, okay? Don't get taken advantage of. Just because you're like, you know, fresh-faced young developers who don't know the value of your own work, you know? But it's okay, because all of our jobs are going to be replaced by AI anyway. He says as facetiously as possible. Yeah. So, on the subject of deployment, everybody did client side, right? Process is the same. Okay? Enough said? Okay. Just test it, okay? And if you have any problems, just let me know. I'll help you however I can. But test it. Test your work. Test your work. I shall be very, very grumpy if I get anything that's obviously not been tested. Alright. So, very good. So let's yeah, okay. I'd like to show you a couple of things now. Some more technical stuff related to this this hello world that we have working. So one of the ways that this is now different, right? One of the ways that server side is different than everything we've done so far is that everything must go through the HTTP packet interface, right? We have not really accomplished anything that we couldn't have done with JavaScript, right? Of course not. All we've done is a print statement. But this can be done with JavaScript just as easily, perhaps a lot more easily than PHP. But let me show you a little bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff here. If you go to Inspect, and you go to the Network tab, the Network tab is probably something you haven't really had occasion to visit before. You'll notice there's nothing here really. You actually need the inspector pane open for it to record network packets. So if you reload the page, you will get your network packet showing up. So this is a list of all of the network packets that have been received, sent and received, by this web application. You should think of each of these as a request-response pair. This includes both request information and response information. Okay? This timing graph up here tells you when the thing was sent and when it was received, how long you were waiting for it on the network. So, fortunately, now that we're back in PHP land, we're kind of more into a regular sequential programming environment, more similar to Java or Python. It's not as asynchronous as JavaScript is, right? You know, you don't have like timing events and that kind of stuff. Like, this is not events-based programming. This is regular imperative programming. Okay? But anyway, so if you click on the packet, bloop, you'll notice that you get all of the header information, including what our request URL was, what server we're connecting to, stuff like, what is my operating system? What is my browser? Maybe. There you go. Chrome. Right? What is my language? I think is in here somewhere. Yeah, there you go. Language accepted. encodings accepted. All of this information is largely not useful to us, except right towards the end of the course. What's more interesting is the response tab. So this is the actual raw textual output of the PHP script. This will be very important for debugging. You guys want to see what PHP does when you do a syntax error? You don't actually, but I'm going to show you. You should know what you're in for. Let's say, instead of echo, I make a horrible spelling mistake. Mecco. This is how syntax errors are reported to you. If you will notice, the syntax error appears in the text of the web page. The text in the web page. Take a look. This is what it generates. So, when you create a syntax error, that becomes your packet output, or at least part of it. Right? Now, what's even more interesting is that other portions can still come through. So, for example, if I have a header up here that's in HTML mode, by the way, anything that's not in a PHP, inside of PHP brackets is in HTML mode, right? So if I just have, you know, is this safe? Safe, safe, safe. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. For certain classes of errors, it will include all of that text plus your error message. So in this case, it's like that. But I think if I do like an out-of-bounds array access, which is like a runtime error rather than a pre-scanner error, then it'll just integrate it. Give me a moment, I'll see if I can produce one. Unexpected echo. Oh! Semicolon. Semicolons are required. They are non-optional. There you go. Hey, there we go. So,
Well, it's slightly better than JavaScript, and that it tells you where the problem is.
it does give you a line number. That's true. It does give you a line number. The issue, though, this is like default HTML mode, and this will show up in default HTML mode. A surprising amount of the time, the thing that the PHP script is supposed to be returning back is a JSON object, right? So if it's anything that requires particular formatting, like a JSON object, your output fails to parse as JSON, and you also don't get the message showing up here, right? I can show you. I could show you how that works. Oh. Yeah, okay, so this has now become PHP variety hour, so comment characters are C-style comment characters. Alright? That means Java/JavaScript comment characters, not Python comment characters. Okay? So you want to see what happens if you try to print an array? It says, first of all, let me get, come on, there you go. First, it drops one of these warnings in anyways, but also that is the actual output. So if you try to print an array, it says, yes, is array. So the way that you print an array is you have to take the array and you have to encode it as a string in such a way that it understands it. One way, the most effective way to do that is to JSON encode. JSON underscore encode is a function you will be writing quite a lot this semester. JSON encode. And there you go. We are no longer trying to convert an array to a string erroneously, and the array has been converted to a string. It appears in the website. Yay! So far, so good. So that's what a variable looks like. You may remember me mentioning last class that all variables begin with the $sign. This is just how it is. You just have to learn that this is what it is. It's like, if you want to get absolutely technical, the $sign is not a part of the identifier. It is a memory access operator. Right? That is an actual operator, similar to the negative sign, but instead of negating an integer, what it does is it says, this corresponds to a memory location, please read or write it appropriately. Okay? So, most languages do that without you having to ask for it, but here we are. So, but, you know, interestingly, if you try to do it without the $sign, undefined constant, right? So like, even though it's a memory access operator, X is still not a pointer, and you can't work with it like it's a pointer. So this is not C. This isn't C. Okay? And this is not C++. So, yes. Any questions so far? People sometimes have questions at this point. Anybody want to see if anything stupid works in PHP? Yeah? Any idea? Anybody got anything they want me to see if it works?
Sweet, if you have like a design element for your PHP, like as in like here, would it like put that, I'm not explaining, would it put the error code in the design part? Or?
Oh, yeah, that's the thing I was going to do. Okay. Right. So let's say that we have this thing that works, right? And let's say we echo, let's reproduce the same error from earlier, right? X at 10. That's the, thank you, this was the thing I was actually trying to demonstrate. So, basically, it's a little annoying that this is working. So, basically, if you ignore this part and just take this part, right? If you try to JSON parse that in JavaScript, it'll flop on this part because that's not JSON. So it will in fact, like your JavaScript will fail out on an error due to that notice being in there. So that's a sufficiently bad problem that like things in other languages which would be just warnings are game-breaking errors here, right? It is the expectation of me in this class and all people who work with PHP that you will never have this appear, right? This should never appear to any customer, right? That's a problem. Does this make sense so far? Okay. Good. Is this useful? Not not really. We'll come back to this one if we have time. It's just a comparison of like other languages. We're talking about PHP, so let's talk about PHP. So, Python, Java, JavaScript. One of these things is not like the other. So, you'll notice that of all of these three things, which one is this one the most similar to?
JavaScript.
Well, we don't have any lets here.
It's not like Python where it's just kind of assuming what the variable, data type variable is.
Yes.
Like you never specify that is a Boolean, but it's just assumed it is because it's true.
Yeah. Not only do you not have, like Python behaves that way, JavaScript also behaves that way, but JavaScript has a keyword that says this is a new variable. PHP does not have that, making it more similar to Python, which doesn't have a let or a var keyword, or at least one that's required. Make sense? So we are in, once again, dynamic weakly typed land, right? Can anybody remind me from your JavaScript exam, what is dynamic typing? What is weak typing? Does anybody remember?
The type of variable can change during process.
Yes. So when the type of the thing in the variable can change as the program executes, that's called dynamic typing. What is weak typing?
You can mix them. In Boolean operations, you can mix different, in operations, you can mix different types. It was just interpreted as, I don't know how to explain it, but like, let's say you have a letter plus a word plus a number, and you just take, you transform the word string into a number, and like 0 plus, I don't know, 2.
Yes. So with weak typing, you have double equals and triple equals. This is weak, this is strong. Weak typing, strong typing. With strong typing, you cannot get away with stuff like this. That's not correct. With weak typing, you can get away with stuff like that. There we go. Right? So weak typing will attempt type conversion before determining equality. Strong typing will not attempt type conversion before doing equality comparison. Generally speaking, strong equality is easier to work with because weak equality requires the memorization of sometimes abstract and obscure typing conversion rules anytime you do anything, right? Now, in JavaScript, that wasn't really an issue. That wasn't really an issue. We could still do most of what we needed to do with, the occasional minor annoyance. In PHP, we are not so lucky. We do need to know this now. And it all has to do with null literals. So, in PHP, there's a whole group of literals that will all equate to each other, and it's bad. So 0 will equate to false, which is perhaps not unexpected. Both of those will also equate to the actual null type, right? I believe these will also equate to both empty string and empty array, right? All of these things are equivalent to each other under weak equality. Now, there is a function called filter input, which we will be studying very soon in this class. Under certain conditions, it may output any one of those three validly. Each one of those means something distinct. So if you're using weak equality to check the output of the filter input function, you will not be able to distinguish between these cases, which means that your program will be wrong. Right? Make sense? So, some stuff is carried over from JavaScript, weak versus strong equality. So, in terms of overall syntax, loops are as you expect them, if statements as you expect them, assignment statements as you expect them, switch statements in the Java style. We're kind of, hopefully by third semester, past the point where we have to talk about if statements, right? So, variable names are case sensitive and must start with the $sign. Yes. So, PHP technically has support for object-oriented, but you're not really going to be required to use it in this course. You'll have to know how to call a method eventually, but we're not really going to be writing our own classes here. So, okay, you want to see something fun?
Yes.
Okay, you know Booleans? How can you mess up Booleans, right? Let me show you. Let me show you how you can mess up Booleans. Dun da 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 dun da 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 dun da 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 dun da da. What could possibly go wrong? Anybody who knows? Did that just send a little shiver down your spine?
But what?
A 1. Oh, if you like that, just wait. If that sent a shiver down your hot spine, this should be Halloween come a month and a half early.
Wait, what? It's not 0. Why?
Empty string. False prints as empty string. Thanks, PHP. I mean, I can explain to you why. Are you guys interested?
Yes.
So, did you know that every single string you've ever dealt with is actually one character longer than you think it is? And this is defined in the kernel. This is like how C defined everything when C set the standard for such things. Every single string that you've ever dealt with has an invisible character. It has the null character. The reason for the existence of the null character is somewhat interesting. C does not have the ability to check bounds on arrays. If you start reading an array in C and you don't know when to stop, you will literally run until you run out of memory and the operating system detects that you're trying to read memory that doesn't belong to you and it crashes your program. That's called a segmentation fault. That's what C does. C does not have the ability to check bounds on arrays. It doesn't do it. You are responsible for checking that. You, the programmer. That's how C is, right? Have you guys ever seen the joke, how to shoot yourself in the foot in various programming languages? Yeah. It's kind of funny. How to shoot yourself in the foot in various programming languages. It's a bit old now, but it's still pretty good. Program, shoot yourself in the foot. Come on! Well, while that figures itself out. So basically, even the empty string itself is actually a string containing the null character. Right? So, what is the ASCII value of the null character? You might be able to guess it. It's 0. So, if you take an empty string and numerically interpret it as an integer, it's 0. Which means, according to PHP, if you take a 0 and interpret it as a character, you get the null character. Which means you get an empty string. Which means that false prints as nothing. This is all well and good until you realize it does this inside JSONs too. JSON encode does this. So, if you're to print a Boolean, you must actually use the string for the Boolean yourself. This is how it works. Are you all sufficiently horrified? This thing's still loading, eh?
Yeah, go back, there should be another one that's there should be one that's a PDF.
Oh.
Yeah, one more.
Wait, this one?
No, no.
York,
this one?
York University, yeah.
Oh yeah, it is a PDF. Alright, there you go. This is how you shoot yourself in the foot in various programming languages. C, you shoot yourself in the foot. That's how you do it. This is more funny if it's languages you know, though.
So what is the PHP one?
See, this isn't the complete list. This is not the complete list. And anyway. My joke is broken. So, there's my joke. So, PHP is that kind of a language. Implicit type conversions are tricky. And PHP has a lot of them. One of the design principles of PHP, it tries not to use a symbol or operator for more than one operation. So, everybody remembers our good old friend, the plus sign. What does the plus sign do in Java? It adds integers. What else does it add? It does floats. You can also do concatenation with it. So, the fact that plus does both integer addition, number addition. By the way, did you know JavaScript only has one type for numbers and it's actually called number? But that's a side point. PHP has a plus sign. That is for arithmetic. Concatenation is a different operator entirely. Anybody care to guess?
Dot.
Hmm?
Dot.
It is dot. Yes, it's period. If you want to concatenate strings in PHP, hello plus world will give you something interesting. Warnings, non-numeric type. If you replace it with dot, that's concatenation. Okay. This somewhat hilariously means that we also have like a dot equals operator in PHP for like concatenate this to it and have it as itself. Or like append. This is, that's what that is. This means append in PHP. So, okay. Let me ask you a question. in Java, what do you use dot for?
That for like the method call?
Yes. Method calls, accessing instance variables, static variables. Basically, dot is your I want something out of an object operator, or I want something out of a class operator, right? It's your OO access operator. But we can't do that here. Dot is already being used for concatenation. So what do? What is the operator? The operator is, you guys ready for it? It is single line arrow. That's method calls in PHP. Again, this didn't come out of nowhere. Like, there is a reason for this. The reason might be that PHP didn't even support object-oriented programming until version 5. But the reason, like, the place they drew this from is actually C. This is the same operator that you use for accessing an element of a structure while also dereferencing the pointer to it in the same step. But of course, without knowing anything about pointers, that doesn't really, that's neither here nor there for us here today. But that's what dot's for, and that's what we use instead of dot everywhere dot is supposed to be used. Does that make sense? I mean, I should stop asking if it makes sense. Do you understand? Yes, okay. Because this doesn't make sense. We are now way off into the land where things don't make sense anymore. So, let's see here, let's see. I'm not done yet, thank you. So, one thing that we're going to speak about in some length a little bit later on in the course is a thing called an associative array. Now, associative arrays are they're very similar to Python dictionaries, but unless you've done Python outside of the Python that you've done here, you wouldn't know about dictionaries, I think. They don't teach dictionaries in Intro Python, right? They don't teach barely anything in Intro Python. So basically, the idea is you have a set of strings, and those map to values, right? The equivalent structure in Java is a hash map, right? In JavaScript, this is basically an object without the methods. That's actually not a completely bad way of thinking about it in Java either. If you took a class and you only populated it with instance variables, you've basically got the same concept. Except, of course, that Java would statically check it and make sure that you were using it appropriately, right? It's a dynamic data structure. But we'll be talking about it a bit more later. So, here's one for you. Here's one I'll leave you on. All right? If x equals 6, echo yes. Else, echo no. Does this echo yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Because you had a 50% chance. It echoes yes. You'll notice that that is a single equal sign there. So what are we doing? What symbol is it?
You're assigning it.
I'm assigning it. I'm assigning it inside of the if statement guard. Guess what? This is a thing PHP developers actually do. You'll find this in the goddamn documentation. Why? Who knows? But it's taking advantage of the fact that in PHP, assignment operations have a return result. Assignment operations have a return result that is the value assigned. So, the value of this is 6. 6 is not 0 and therefore true.
That's awful.
If I replace this with 6, I also get yes. But if I replace this with just x, which of course, there we go. Just x is no, because 0 is the same thing as false. Right? More fun and games. What do we have classes on again? Is it Thursday? Tuesday?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Okay. Well, I shall see you on Odin's Day then.
I mean, I'm okay. Last semester we just like running late.
I have a little bit of time. No more.
I'll send you an email, but